$4,237,000. That is the number glowing on the screen at 6:14 a.m. on a Wednesday in March, and at 35 years old, exactly 8 weeks after selling the company you spent 11 grueling years building, you sit in the heavy, unbroken quiet of your Manhattan apartment with a $640 burr grinder, sipping coffee brewed from single-origin beans shipped every other Friday, realizing with a slow, creeping panic that while the wire confirmation cleared in 3 seamless tranches, it did so long before you ever figured out who you were supposed to. For over a decade, your life was held upright by a rigid, unrelenting calendar, investor updates on Monday mornings, engineering syncs at 10:15, the 2 p.m. call you desperately wanted to avoid, the last-minute flight to Palo Alto for a 30-minute dinner, and the late-night text from Devansh at 11:47 p.m. that contained a single word, thoughts, to which you instantly knew the answer without needing context. That suffocating structure was the scaffolding of your entire existence. It was the thing you constantly complained about in Uber rides and dreamed of escaping. The first brutal rule of a major exit is that it strips away your life structure long before it removes your deep-seated psychological need to produce, leaving you with a mathematically flawless 4% safe withdrawal rate on $4.2 million that yields $168,000 a year in perpetuity, a formula that cleanly solves every financial equation of your material survival, while offering absolutely zero answers to the heavy existential questions now waiting for you at 11:02 a.m., in the middle of a quiet aisle. At a grocery store where you stand staring at oat milks, the shift happens slowly, then all at once like discovering a cracked tooth, as you wander into a high-end gym at 9:30 a.m. and realize it exists as a completely different country populated by retirees on recumbent bikes and people working out with personal trainers who call them by their first names. And as you catch your reflection in the mirror between sets, you notice that while your body looks fine, your eyes carry a specific, haunting fatigue that sleep alone can no longer fix. You drive home in 14 minutes, a route you used to drive at 8:47 p.m. feeling like you had earned every single red light. And now at 11:02 a.m., it produces no feeling at all, prompting you to text Imani, your closest former colleague who is now a vice president at the acquiring firm, only to receive a brief reply at 2:30 p.m. saying she is buried in meetings and will call later. A call that never comes because you used to be the exact same person sending midnight apology texts promising to catch up next week, when you both knew next week meant 3 months from now or never. By week 10, the cracks in your foundation become impossible to ignore at a Brooklyn dinner party hosted by your former neighbor, where 6 people sit around a long wooden table beneath expensive designer lamps, and someone casually asks the standard adult question of what you do, to which you awkwardly reply, "I just sold a company," triggering nods of abstract impression from 4 guests and a piercing second question from a woman running a non-profit. "So what are you doing now?" You open your mouth and a 3-second silence falls over the table, a silence that feels like an eternity. Desperate to replace the vacuum, you begin the predictable ritual of buying your way out of a structural problem by signing up for an 8-session pottery class for $480 where you abandon your uneven bowl after 3 visits, hiring a patient Spanish tutor for Wednesday afternoons at 4 p.m., only to discover that verbs will not stick when there are no stakes and no looming corporate death driving your retention, and purchasing a $2,495 Peloton bike that you ride 22 times the first month for times the second month, and eventually convert into a very expensive coat rack in the corner of your bed. A woman in her early 50s who spends the first 40 minutes of your meeting ignoring your portfolio and asking a single question. What does your life look like in 5 years? A question you attempt to answer 3 times before stopping mid-sentence and admitting you have no idea, prompting her to nod knowingly and share that most clients in your position cannot answer that for 18 months until they finally stop trying to retire, revealing the profound truth that you are not retired at all, but rather unemployed with capital, which is a vastly different condition because retirement was designed for people who spent 40 years inside a structure they did not. Seeking community, you are added in week 14 to a private signal group of 31 local founders who have exited companies for anywhere between $14 million and $290 million, only to discover that they almost never talk about money. Instead, they talk about restoring a 1962 sailboat in Sausalito, writing books on 19th-century Argentine monetary policy, managing their own micro-portfolios, or reading 90 books a year, proving the third rule that securing capital is the easy part of the equation. while finding long-term direction is the hard part that your trip to Portugal offers endless hours of walking quiet streets, reading novels and eating alone. But when you return on a Sunday night, your New York apartment sits exactly as you left it, covered in a thin layer of dust that acts as cold proof that nothing in the universe changes when you are not there. A terrifying reality for someone who spent 11 years believing that bending reality was the entire purpose of existence. This brings you face to face with the fourth rule. The hardest part of leaving the machine is realizing that the machine loved you in a way you can never replicate. Not kindly or gently, but entirely, demanding your presence at 7 a.m. and 1 a.m. and on Christmas Day when production servers crashed, serving as the most committed relationship of your adult life, leaving behind a profound sense of grief that carries no funeral and no public permission to feel because the outside world insists that you have already won. By week 19, without making a flashy public announcement, posting on LinkedIn, or messaging the Signal group, you open a plain paper notebook and write down 14 obscure operational problems you noticed over the last decade that no one else bothered to solve, crossing out 11 of them, spending 2 weeks researching the remaining 3, and ultimately selecting an unglamorous, remarkably boring niche involving compliance documentation for small businesses, a problem your 28-year-old self would have sneered at for lacking venture scale, but which your 35-year-old self recognizes as a quiet signal that no one has paid close enough attention. You open a fresh document, title it, Hire a Single Talented Engineer Out of Pocket for $14,800 a month, deliberately refuse outside capital so your calendar never refills in its old soul-crushing shape, and commit to building for exactly 4 hours a day before stopping at 2 p.m. to take a walk, read, visit your therapist on Tuesdays, and have dinner with Imani on Thursdays without canceling. In month 1 the new venture makes $0, in month 2 it makes $0, and in month 3 it makes $2,400, a sum of money you mathematically do not need but one that changes everything. You stop describing yourself as retired or trying to craft impressive answers for strangers, and when the second question inevitably comes up at dinner parties, you simply describe the small quiet problem you are working on, offering an answer that is not impressive in the grand way your exit was impressive, but one that is completely yours, bringing you to the fifth and final rule. Wealth at this scale is not the end of effort, but the extraordinary privilege of choosing which work is worth doing, allowing you to build slowly, stay small on purpose, and refuse the version of success that once cost you your evenings, your health, and your peace of mind. Now at 36 years old, your new software tool has 14 paying customers, generates $11,200 a month, and will likely never be sold or scaled to a massive valuation. Yet as you wake up at 7:14 a.m. on a Wednesday with $4,394,000 sitting in your brokerage account, the money no longer carries the psychological weight it once did. You brew your coffee, sit down at your desk, open the document, and begin writing, fully aware that somewhere in another apartment in another city, a 34-year-old founder is staring at a $6.8 million wire confirmation, believing the hard work is finally over, completely unaware that the real challenge has just begun, because the machine was never the company itself. The machine was the part of him that needed a worthy direction to pour his life into long after the money arrived.